y'all, I'm Mary, and I'm Carla, and we're the Smiley Twins. And today on Not Just Lip Service, we are going to do an episode kind of about employees, essentially. So,
like actual employees.
Yeah, so, really quick, I'm just going to dive right in. The difference in a contractor, 1099 contractor and employee, big differences. Legal differences, differences of what you can and cannot do, the way you can and cannot treat them, what you tell them you can and cannot do. There's some major differences there. We're not going to so much get into that. We're going to get
I think the point is there's big differences, but in reality, from the IRS standpoint, there's not. And so what happens, I think, is that
you're just like really diving in.
Well, I just wanted to, because it's an important thing. Like people are like, oh, I'll just contract with you, whatever, and I'll just pay you.
Well,
I'll just Venmo you.
Sure, maybe not from a financial standpoint. I just mean like from.
Well, that's
some other.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a definition. You can Google the IRS's definition of contractor versus employer, and there's a very specific page on the IRS's website detailing out, and it's not hard to understand in layman terms, when someone's an employee, when they're not. And for a lot of us, most of the people who are working with us are employees. So you have to be really careful about that, especially if you're like, oh, I'm going to bring on an injector to work with me in my spa. Yeah, that's almost always going to be an employee.
Like I said, that's a little...
This might be a
two-parter.
Just because they're not working full-time doesn't mean you just get to call them a part-time contractor.
So should we back up a little bit on what we plan to do and maybe just discuss, do we need to discuss
No, because I think there's a lot to discuss with. I liked where we were going with this, which is like, okay, I'm growing and I want to bring on an employee or a contractor or whatever the case is.
Well, let's just so... And we can get some comment. We'll fill some comments and stuff on this or whatever, and maybe do another episode. But we'll focus on the employee aspect of it, whether that's a W-2 employee and what that means versus the 1099 contractor. But we're just gonna kind of set the contractor aside, and it's like you need to bring on your first person in the med spa, and you've decided it's an employee for hopefully the right reasons, and so things that like need to be considered when you bring on your first employee.
Mary sometimes scoffs at me, which she did a second ago, but I just really think it's important to call out the fact that when you decide to bring on an employee, you are deciding to begin to manage somebody, manage another human, you're taking a lot on.
I wasn't scoffing. I was just saying that's an entirely other episode on how.
No, it's not. I don't want to talk about how to manage them. I'm just pointing out the fact again that managing somebody, sometimes I think as nurses or people who have never managed somebody or had an employee, it's flippant. It can be very much, oh yeah, I'm going to bring somebody on. And it's just like you're entering this whole new world. This isn't like hiring a babysitter to watch your kids. This is taking another life. Someone's probably leaving their job if they're coming to work for you full time. Like you now hold their entire livelihood in your hand. There's just a lot to consider. That's what we're talking about here. And it's not talking about the abstract.
Entire livelihood.
Yes, because if you give somebody a job, most people are not doing the background on your company or whatever unless you're really transparent in the interview to be like, hey, I could fail next month, FYI, and you could lose this job.
Yeah, no.
So what are you leaving?
Yeah, that's true. They are just getting into the industry they want to be in, especially.
Yeah, they're like, oh my gosh, a med spa job, especially the med spa.
Yes, yeah, that's
like, oh man, an injector med spa job, and they'll hire me. I'm leaving my hospital job. I'm leaving. It's a lot. So now their finances, and if all of a sudden you tell them, yeah, I'm gonna have to shut this down next month. I mean, typically if you get to that point, you've got enough money to, if you're lucky, make the next payroll, or maybe not. And then that's just it for them.
Yeah, or you lay them off before you shut down. Yeah, you lay them off even quicker.
It's just a different way of thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, so
if you have half a heart.
Well, here's my fear of this episode. I'm just going to say it out loud just in case this happens. I think you have a lot more experience than the average medical provider in leadership and management and stuff, and so you need to keep it dumbed down.
Well, I just
keep it to practical things. Well, hold on. I just want to keep you to practical. There are entire books, I would know, on how to manage and lead people. And, let's pretend that people don't have time. They're not reading those first.
No, I'm not.
They don't have your. Yeah. So, okay, I'm gonna ask some questions. I'm gonna ask questions.
I just want to say my baseline point is the moment you decide I need help or I'm going to hire somebody, you shift your foundational thinking into I'm taking another person's life in my hands, their financial and their work, the majority of their free time in my hands, and that. So when you put everything in that realm before you go into any of this practical stuff. It helps frame your mind on how you should think about this practical stuff, like PTO or all the other things we're going to talk about, insurance, benefits, like all that stuff. If your mind is in the thought process of really protecting that person and making sure you're on that side of things, and I would argue way on that conservative side of things, it just will really help you not screw somebody over if you F it
that'll
up.
also translate into the biggest, probably the overwhelming biggest thing in the entire thing with employees is retention. So it's important.
Yes,
It's
it all
as
feeds
important
in.
to retain an employee
Yes.
as it is a client. We all know client retention gives you way more money than a new client. Same thing in the employee realm.
Yep.
Retaining an
Employees too.
employee makes you and saves you way more money than
Yeah.
hiring new people.
It's just a foundation.
Okay, so I am a excuse me. Okay, well, I sound like I smoke. Okay, I should have said that because I assume I have the flu. My assistant had the flu, and so I have to assume I had the flu, and we had the same symptoms pretty much. So my
Now
voice
she's breathing on me.
I'm sitting pretty far away from you. My voice sounds funny. Okay, and I might have to cough for a second. I'll try to mute it. So I'm not a new med spa owner. I've established myself, and I do need help. We've gotten to that magical 80% booking rate if I'm the injector of this med spa, which I assume will be in. Let's use the standard med spa, new med spa owner, single provider, doing it all, wearing all the hats, and injecting typically to make money, maybe firing a laser, kind of doing it all. I'm 80% full because we don't get 100% full before we bring somebody else on, and we want to bring someone else on, and it doesn't necessarily, or I'm 50% full, and I want to bring on just another employee. It doesn't have to be another injector or whatever, so let's keep it general. I'm going to bring on my first person to help me in whatever realm that is. So I don't even want to get into is it a marketing person, is whatever. It's just like my first employee who's going to help me.
I already have something to say.
Well, I don't have a question, so that's the scenario that I just painted.
Okay, so a note on the scenario. For med spas, it's very important to delineate between the two. You can't just say I'm going to add on an employee, whether an injector or anybody else, because there are two different pathways there. Because we're in a service-based industry where your physical hand is what's making you the money, it's a lot different than that role, or that employee is very different than all the other roles you could hire.
You're still getting down to the specifics. I kind of want to just be like,
well, no, what I'm saying is the reason that I'm saying that is because the opinion on, okay, I want to bring somebody on. Let's just focus on the injector. Like, you need to bring somebody in that you are managing, because obviously on the other, I can't keep my financial brain out of it. On marketing, all the other stuff, I'm like, just outsource before you bring an employee on. So it's an important foundational thing.
Well, I
can't help it.
Right? It's amazing. We're not on the same brain wavelength right now because my brain wavelength is in the trash.
Or it's in the clouds, and mine is somewhere on the ground picking blades of grass.
Okay, well, equally both in weird places. So, no, I think we're yours. Yeah, yes, I hear you. That is very important in deciding who. We're not talking about who we're bringing.
Can we just say we're bringing on another injector?
No, I want you to go a little more high level than that, because I want it to be more generalized than that. I want it to be things that are applicable to any employee we bring on. So let's start with time off. How do you feel about time off, and what are your thoughts about time off? And so what are your thoughts about PTO and how much, and unlimited PTO? And
so
it doesn't matter who the person is. I understand that they're a revenue provider.
PTO can go a couple, three different ways in general. You can have PTO as in paid time off that includes both sick time and vacation time. Or you can have a PTO bank and a sick bank, or you can have unlimited PTO that includes both. And they're just different things. Or you could probably have an unlimited PTO and also have a sick bank that accrues.
Some people have if they have a sick and a PTO, they might have a bereavement policy.
Yeah, bereavement is almost, if you don't have a bereavement policy, you're an asshole. Yeah, bereavement being...
I don't have a bereavement policy.
Well, because we have unlimited PTO, and if somebody told me their mom died, I would be go take the time that you need.
I knew that's what you were going to say. Don't get aggressive with me. Yeah. I knew that's what you were going to say. I was
bereavement
leading
policy
you into
meaning, you obviously someone passes and you need time to grieve. Typically, you'll see 3 days is a typical 3 paid off days, sometimes 2, a day before a funeral, day after. Now, that's for family member. If it's an immediate family member, that's the stuff like that qualifies for FMLA. So, again, it's hard not to get into the weeds, but there's other things to consider. FMLA,
sure.
Federal medical leave,
of absence.
Leave of absence qualifies for. I'm pretty sure from the federal level, you have to be employed with the people for a year before FMLA is kicked in, before you're covered by FMLA. Don't quote me on that, but I'm almost certain that that's the thing. And then you have things like, each state might have a FMLA policy for, in Tennessee, you used to get 16 weeks from maternity leave, and in Georgia, you got 12. Now I think Tennessee dropped theirs to 12. Wow. Talk about going backwards. But anyways, so just looking at PTO or sick time, this is not looking at if you have short-term disability. So a lot of people will have a PTO policy that says if you're going to miss more than a week because of a disability or an illness or something like that, then that's all you're going to get is paid time off. And you're going to then need to go get short-term disability or something else to help cover your expenses, things like that. So we're just talking about people who, on the radar, people who just want, just to take time off. Smiley Aesthetics does unlimited PTO. I'm a big believer on that. I did a big paper and research on this in my doctorate on the benefits of unlimited PTO and what that does with morale and retention and all kinds of things. And in my opinion, and now I am of the opinion that you can use research to prove almost anything, because there's research out there for everything. And unlimited PTO is probably one of those things, but there's a bunch of research that shows that it does, people are retained more, they're happier, etc. What does that mean? Unlimited PTO doesn't mean you get to take off as much as you want whenever you want. What that is referring to is you're not banking time. So I'll use a company I used to work for, by example. You weren't supposed to use PTO in the first, I believe it was 75 days. Now, of course, your boss could work with you on that, but your PTO bank, your boss couldn't work with you. There was no paid time off prior to that. Your PTO banked on that 75th day. You were accruing it the entire time at whatever the rate is. Mm-hmm. So I might accrue 5.2 hours a paycheck or something like that. You set those rates. So then in a month, if I'm getting paid bi-weekly or bi-monthly, or twice a month, then I would get 10.5 hours. Obviously an 8-hour day. So if I took off one day, the next month I'd only have 2 hours left. But of course I'm accruing.
I was gonna have to re-listen. You might have to re-listen to that little.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair. Most people kind of understand how PTO works. So set a rate for banking, and then every paycheck it banks into a piggy bank.
And for practical reasons, we use Gusto.
Gusto.
Whatever. If you're listening to Gusto, if you're listening to this GUSTO, we have a referral code. So we love it. I think it's and Carla could speak this a little bit more, but I'm of the consumer user side, like as in not the.
She's not an admin. You're an employee.
Yeah, I don't use it for the admin stuff because I don't need to because Carla, other people do that, and so from the employee side, it's very easy.
Yeah,
you have an app and it's
clock
so
in
easy.
and out. You can send employment offers, policies. There's paid time off, tracking, approvals. They kind of
just have like everything.
It's an HR platform. They have the required trainings for each state that are required. Like, so if you're a state, there's 4 states that require sexual assault training, by example, in the workplace.
Do I even do?
No.
Tennessee.
There's 19 that consider it highly recommended but not required, yada, yada, yada. So Gusto has all of that. There's other platforms like Rippling and some of those. Gusto is very affordable, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy their customer service and everything else. So a great one to go with.
They have a cute little logo too.
Yeah, they send labor law posters. They just
said, I just carried on the conversation.
Yeah.
Cute logo.
I don't care about the logo, but anyway, they have an app, for employee clocking in and out, etc.
Yeah. Okay.
They're a payroll platform. So
what else on the PTO?
I'll wrap it up. So, the unlimited PTO, that's important to talk about because you have to set the stage and the standard in your policy and the conversations up front and be very clear about them that, okay, if you're going to take a single day off, the point is that an employee doesn't have to give huge amounts of notice if they need rest or they're just overwhelmed or like, hey, I'm going to get my requirements and deliverables completed, but I need to take off a day 2 days from now. Like, is it detrimental to you to be able to allow that? Like, again, if they're an injector in the spa and that's their day to work the spa and the spa's going to close and no one's going to cover them, that might be a conversation.
When you get down to it,
you've got to look at the details.
Yeah, mindful of the revenue.
It doesn't mean you can't do an unlimited policy with someone like that, but then it just has to be a lot of when it's just you and someone else.
We're doing that with several right now.
Well, yeah, but if it's just you with if it's just you and someone else, you just really have to think through some of those details.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then so let's talk about our pain points. Let's bring it back to more practical of the pain points we've experienced, high level, with our unlimited PTO.
It's the biggest pain point that was practical for this podcast because a lot of our pain points are because we have a lot of different employees. as opposed to just bringing on one for the scenario you mentioned earlier, is that making sure that you explain it ahead of time that unlimited PTO doesn't mean you take off as much as you want whenever you want.
Yeah.
It simply really means, among other principles, that you're not banking hours. That if you need time off, if you need a break, you want to go on a week of vacation with your family, just because you had, a terrible, you got COVID for a week in June, and you had your beach vacation mid-July. Well, if you have a traditional policy, they may have used all 40 hours they had accrued over the last 6 months, and so now they can't take any time off in July because they don't have PTO. That's where you start getting into a lot of the theory and philosophy around, not doing that to people so they don't feel like they got to come to work. I mean, it just kind of ripples why it's what makes it a better option.
So, I forgot the one point I was going to make about what you just said. But so for those listening that do have multiple employees and stuff, and it's like, oh, I've never considered unlimited PTO. I've heard about this and I want to consider implementing it. Like, what are some things? Or the person who's bringing on the one, and this is going to be this is my policy. I stand firm on, like you did, stand firm on this is what I want the company to do. And no matter how many employees we have, we still continue to have an unlimited PTO policy. What are like some things to consider, like not as the employee? You said, I understand what PTO is as the employee, now I'm the employer. What are some things I need to consider to manage it when I look up in a year and I have 23 employees?
Yeah.
And like I said, kind of like we did, but what are some things to think on the front?
Honestly, what I just said, if your policy is clear that some other things to consider in a multi-employee PTO policy, more than one person being off at the same time. Which is a lot of this stuff is very standard. Like if you're a medical provider,
it ain't standard if I'm a new business owner and I don't know what to.
Well, but it is if you're like in a hospital, is what I was going to say. Like it's pretty standard coverage. When you are working shifts, when the care or the business is dependent on your presence, a service-based industry like a nurse in a hospital,
pretty
or a
much.
med spa.
Grocery store.
Well, sure, yeah. But I mean, if there's 5 people supposed to work at the grocery store and only one shows up, well, this ketchup's still on the shelf. People can still come in and buy. I mean, it can be a little bit different when you're, the spa is closed if you're not there.
Standing in that line.
Yeah.
Self-checkout.
But the point is, so if the business relies on the person being there or the actual opening of the business, which to your point is a lot of.
So consider multiple providers. If you end up with more than one, or even that one, if you bring someone on and you get rocking and rolling, and they are a revenue producing employee, let's just argue for argument's sake, say they're an injector, still being mindful of what a week off of them not being there means, and
because you're paying them, right? You're paying them paid time off, so they're making their salary. Plus, you're not making any of the revenue, so it can be very impactful. But again, it all goes back to the beginning. What does your policy should be very clear on, and the conversations you have with that employee that are documented and should reflect the policy on whatever that might be.
Bullet point number 1, certain amount of approval, putting it at a certain amount of time prior. Well, not single days or things that happen, but like if you want a week off or over a week off, prior approval of a minimum of however many days.
So you're triggering me.
For vacation, maybe.
Not
for like.
Well, I mean, if you're just going to be a 2-person spa and you're bringing somebody on like in March, then you're probably 3 to 5 months out needing to know vacation. And then here's where this is where I go back to the foundational thing. If you're taking on somebody else, and selflessness is part of this, you as the owner can't be like, I want a free-for-all in the summer of what I do because I own the business. I can do whatever I want. You can't expect your employees just to pick up the slack. Yep. That's not how it works when you're running a business. It will be detrimental to you. So if you hire somebody in March and then they want, you need to ask them, what was your vacation time going to be in July? And if they say, well, the first week of July, and you're like, well, I was going to take the first week of July. I mean, that's when things start getting sticky right away. So a longer lead time when you're smaller is much, much more important, because there's no shifting and pivoting at all. So, and then to avoid people getting pissy, or getting upset, and you just being, because let's be honest, if we both want that off as the owner, 99% of us are going to be like, well, I mean, I'm the owner. So
even for our unlimited PTO policy, I feel like something we don't do that we could is like look more than a quarter, like half the year ahead. And starting in December, even try to look a year out. And if people know, because like, for example, Carla and I, we know at least one of our set
we are bound by.
We're set
out of control circumstances.
Yeah, so we go on vacation when we go together, which we pretty much do every year now for this week. We know when it is, so like those types of things. Time, and most people do have those set vacations or whatever every year, like, and then okay, something else to consider. It's like the spring, the people, the moms.
Yeah,
Living in the same area with the spring and fall break.
Spring break, fall break, Christmas, holidays.
Yeah, not everybody can take off all those weeks and stuff, which this is where I don't mean to call us out, but it's like, and we are actively like, kind of doing whatever, because it's been so, like, we implemented this policy and it's been great. I feel like we got lucky maybe. I'm not really sure. We also have an amazing group of employees that just work so hard and whatever. But like, I looking at the back half of the year with the holidays and stuff, it's like, well, not everybody can take Thanksgiving week off, or not everybody can take, the whole week of Christmas off, and so just being mindful of like, oh, we just need to.
Yeah, no, we navigated that last year. We're navigating that fine, yeah. But yeah, to being mindful of it as you bring employees on, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you say it like it's so obvious, but we're talking, it's so obvious to some people to remember to do that. I'm bullet pointing things to remember to do. So holidays and time surrounding holidays, because someone might want a long weekend. July 4th on Thursday. A lot of people may want July 5th off. Not everybody can have July 5th off. It's a normal day. Stuff like that. So considering around surrounding holidays.
Then, excuse me. As you grow and you bring on people who aren't necessarily injectors, there is going to be a unbalancedness to the scale of who has the freedom to take off when. And that's just the nature of the beast. So if somebody is doing nothing but quality, let's say by example, yes, they can randomly take off a day, 2 days from now. That is a lot easier than someone who is literally managing and injecting
it's
a spa.
also knowing that you can also take it totally away, like, and look at it at a different perspective of that person they're not so much task oriented or their strategy and but what they do can be done. Not that we super promote when you're on PTO, being on PTO for sure. With at the higher level and stuff, and some of the C-suite positions, you take a look at your email once a day. Probably. But for the most part, you take PTO. When you take PTO, that's a healthy way to do it. It's hard for some go-getters, especially in our company. I'll throw another shout out to our employees. A lot of them don't do it well, neither do Carla and I. But I kind of appreciate it, but also totally appreciate when someone fully takes the time off. So that's my little rant on that. My point, what I was going to say is that, like the direct, quality person, they might be able to literally shove in a project and finish it 2 days early just so they can take that day off, whereas an injector can't do that. And to her point, it's just another way to look at
the cost of doing business.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, you're a butt in this.
And you can't compare the two and be like, well, she gets to do X. Well, she just chose a different line of work. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, and
you chose direct hands-on patient care, and she does IT.
Yeah,
like it's just a difference. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so but having those. The key, everything circles back to, and when it comes to things like PTO, is having the conversation on the front end, having a very clear policy on PTO, and the very clear conversations and expectations that are set in an interview process.
Yeah, and I do actually think, like, this may be for as you move forward and hire more people, or you come into this may be out of that single person hiring their first person, but it's like, designating in that policy, the injector for a med spa facility, the injectors, this is y'all's policy. Even the directors or the whatever, not even it doesn't have to be levels. It's just the administration team, the operations team, things that where boots on the ground is not as important. Those policies, maybe the only policy I ever see as an injector is the injector policy, because that's the only one that pertains to me. So that's all it really. And then, it's kind of like, it's not, or be transparent and have them all there.
Yeah.
But it's just,
it just depends on what the transparency level you're going to have.
But I think it might be a good idea to break it, you're breaking down your policy.
Yeah. I mean, this goes right into the kind of a next topic is like, I think that's important to think about when you bring somebody on, is transparency. How you have to decide, again, it's a little abstract, but it flows in everything. How transparent, okay, I'm bringing on someone to help me. How transparent am I going to be with this person? And that goes into not only transparent, but trust and security and all those types of things, because you do need to think about things like, okay, if I'm going to be fully trusting of this person, and do I have a lock on my supply room door? And it's like, okay, no, I trust that person. But like, you really do just always want to be on the conservative, assume shit's going to hit the fan side of things, and protect yourself. So some other practical things is, I'm bringing somebody else into my spa. How are supplies handled?
So, and once again, of course, I think it depends. Well, if I'm an injector, I have to have a supply closet. It's like, just that we're being general here, but it's just.
You can have a supply closet, but
if you're going to have a cash and stuff, how is that going to be handled? That's a big one. People paying cash, and what's that going to look like? And codes on the supply door. Where our director of med spa operations, the first thing he did when he got here was kind of implement codes on
that
every
are trackable.
door.
Like we get a log. Yeah.
So it sends there's an app that goes with it. So he can pull it and see, if necessary, who when the last, who went in and where the last time someone went in, all those types of things. Heck, he even looks to see how long a door's been open at one given time as I stare at it. So, and if it's been open for too long, then he knows it was propped open, and that's not, that type of thing.
Now, okay, but what you're bringing up is something that's really important, again, to consider if you're bringing on somebody. You can implement all of those things, but if in order for them to work, someone has to look at them. So by bringing on an employee, it's not, your life doesn't get any easier. It gets more complicated in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah,
so
they can easier in some.
Well, no, but my point was going to be they can take off. So if your 80% can drop to 50, or hopefully whatever, that's great news. But that time is going to immediately be filled with basically QC and quality control and management of said employee. And those who don't manage their employee, I think that's where medical professionals, anybody who's never managed an employee, get twisted in the thought that it makes my life easier. And it's not that it necessarily has to make it harder. But at best, I think you're flatlining, because managing somebody,
well, especially in the beginning,
and managing somebody who's not a rock star is just a lot of work, and even your rock stars can be a lot of work.
Well, or not a rock star like you were a rock star. So there are different types of rock stars, and it's like they might be really, really great at things that
maybe they rocket injecting, but they like suck at charting.
Social media.
Yeah, at social media, and they refuse to do inventory, or you got to be ready. What happens one day when an inventory should be done every single day. And you're missing a bottle of Botox.
So another point to bring up is, so that kind of goes back up to high level, like disciplinary, having the plan,
clear disciplinary policy.
Written warning, verbal warning, written warning, whatever on certain things. Like she just said, which is almost triggering for me. Someone refuses to do inventory, because to me, I'm like, refuse to do inventory. Like I will just what? And my first inclination as someone who now has experience managing people, but not as much as like, well, I'll just, I'm just gonna fire them. Well, that is very costly in time. You just spent 3 weeks on orientating.
It's not the right answer. Yeah.
And so it's like, and they refuse to do inventory. What are you gonna do? And so having firing them, we're not gonna get into at-will states and all that stuff, but
it's important to know.
Yeah,
you're an at-will state or not.
Know the laws, your labor laws and your employee laws of your state, but then B, they're not doing something to your standard. Is it acceptable? Is it not? It's like this little pathway of just like,
because how many times are they going to push and you just bend because you need them?
Yeah.
And so a couple of things on that. It is, I am going to real briefly, at will versus for cause states. There's most states are at will now, which means you don't have to have a reason to fire somebody, which you have to have a reason to fire them, kind of, but not right fit can be the reason. So you can't fire somebody based on obviously discrimination, disability, blah, blah, all the things we all know. But if I'm like, you know what?
Be careful with.
Well, but if I'm like, you know what, culturally, like for the culture of this company, like you're just a bad fit. Like you can put that you're not the right fit on a form on an at-will state. Now that being said, I think it's really important a principle I live by is that if you've thought about firing somebody, you're already too late. And when you start thinking about, gosh, we just need to fire this person, you're probably behind the 8 ball if you have experience managing people. So, because Mary just triggered me on that, be careful, because right away it's like, well, she just refused. Well, let's just get rid of her. That's, and you're not immature or naive, but that is it's way too soon of a thought process. But if you've been working with somebody and things are consistently coming up and you've managed people before and you're like, it's just really spend too much time. Maybe I should just replace her. You're behind the 8 ball in the sense of, if you're to that point, there should already be multiple conversations that have been documented. There should be multiple teachable moments or verbal written warnings or whatever the case is, that however your disciplinary structure is happening, you should never get to a point of, well, maybe I should just replace this person, because clearly multiple things have already happened. And if you get to that point and you have nothing on paper and you've never spoken to that employee about their performance, and the first time you're speaking to them, you already have any thoughts about firing them, you've done the employee a disservice.
So let's pause right here and bring it back up to higher level. And another couple bullet points to consider when you're bringing an employee. And this is, this list gets long pretty quick, but it doesn't have to be, it's not quite as overwhelming as it seems. But reviews. So have a plan for, I don't care what type of employee it is, even if it's just the first one's an annual review, have some type of plan. Carla, I think, prefers 90 days or 30, 60, 90-day plan. But it's like, have some sort of performance plan. It doesn't have to be super formal, but document what you did. Somehow you don't have to have this beautiful, you could probably Google it and find one, but like a performance review that's entitled that you can kind of document that you did. And then also when things happen, even if they seem minor, if they kind of annoy you, and I don't want to get too like, oh my God, she just like wore the color pink today, like too into the weeds. But if it's something that's a performance issue, or in any way could have been harmful to the company, anything that was like that, document it. It's so simple. We say this all the time. Start an Excel spreadsheet now and document your stuff, the action you took. You can also Google these. We didn't Google this, but we have one made where we document the event that happened, the action took, the teaching moment that was done, the date it happened, the time, the response, all these things, and it goes into
I'm a big Quint Studer fan, Studer Studer. His principles and theories have all these things, and it is important to educate yourself. I mean, if you're bringing on one person, sure, you don't know to get a doctorate in leadership, but taking the time to learn some of the principles of managing people, I do think is important. But he has the tools. His company, the Studer Group, has all the tools for all this type of stuff. Big believer in monthly one-on-ones and things like that. If it's just you and another injector, why you wouldn't sit down for an hour or 30 minutes weekly and go over not only their performance, but also the performance of the spa. And, hey, this is what we're trying to do. And then it's in everything in managing people and leadership goes all back to communication every single time, which the PTO conversation we just had, when I went back to the policy, it's all about communication. In touching base with people without wasting time, making efficient meetings and things. Communication is just going to solve all your problems. Some of them are foundational blocks, to Mary's point, of having documentation and stuff, so that when the day comes that you sit down, people should fire themselves. Like, I don't fire you, you fired yourself. And makes my life a lot easier, because when you fire somebody, it's not to be taken lightly. And I've learned over the years that my leadership theory is so employee-centric, probably to a fault. I am much more on the inside of the employee, maybe because I was one and found so many things that I hated from the employer. And even as the employer now, I still just lean so much to the employee side, and almost, again, to a fault. You fired yourself. And if I fire somebody, that's the first thing I tell them. You fired yourself, and here's why. It's a lot easier if you have it on paper. Here's this and this and this and this. I mean, I have employees sign teachable moments. You don't want to sign it, refuse to sign. Here's what does that look like the day I fire you? Not very good. I tried to tell you this. You wouldn't even sign it. Like, let's just start there. Like, people should fire themselves. If you have one.
No, I'm talking about me and you.
Oh, Lord. People fire themselves, and I think that's important as an employer. That's a really practical tip to get in your head. So while I'm very employee-centric, another foundational block of mindset is that people fire themselves. So then they should fire themselves, and you should make your life easier, because firing somebody is not easy. It is not easy to sit down with someone and have them fall the F apart, and you're ruining their life and their family and how they're going to feed their kids. And you've got to those conversations, here's the evidence, and it just makes things a lot easier, and you can sleep at night, because having that happen, and it invariably will happen, is very difficult. So having some of that stuff to help you as an employer is really important.
Okay, so let's go back kind of through some of the some bullet points, and we've by no means hit all of the things to consider, but just some things to start to consider that'll kind of help you with your first few hires or whatever. And then it is a learn as you go, and hopefully going back to kind of the people that Carla referenced in here, you're doing a little bit of learning, especially as a medical provider, because once again, I've said it before, I may lead in the OR, but I don't know how to and manage in the OR. That's very, very different than in managing in a different type of business setting. So it just is. So don't let that fool you either. But so we talked about knowing what you want to do for your paid time off or unlimited PTO time. Let's not, I literally have avoided saying this, because what you're going to do with benefits, we're not going to talk about it. Carla's not going to go into, because we'll be here another 45 minutes. But there are laws surrounding whether you have to offer if you have to offer them, how many hours they have to be offered at, that stuff, and we can talk about that another time. So you need to consider what benefits you might offer, which is the difference to a 1099. One of the differences in a W-2 and a 1099.
And that's where people get in trouble. They just make them 1099 so they don't have to offer benefits if they choose to carry them in a company.
And they still act as employees.
If you offer health benefits, you have to offer them to everybody who qualifies based on their hours worked.
That's a great little tidbit. So,
okay. So if you decide to have health insurance through your business for yourself, great. If you add on an employee, you then have to also offer that employee those benefits. And that's where people get in trouble. So they're like, oh, they're a contractor. It's like, no, they're acting as an employee.
Well, no. So you're saying that, say they may be a 1099, you may call them a 1099 and give them a 1099, but based on what what you said, mentioning the IRS thing, they actually act as an employee, so they actually do qualify for benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other reason people get in trouble and the reason they don't want to have people be employed over IRS is because when you have an employee, you are paying part of their Social Security, Medicare. You're paying half the self-employment tax, half their federal income, Social Security, and Medicare tax. Half of the Social Security and Medicare taxes.
Right.
So you're paying, in federal income, you're paying those are being pulled out, and half those. So it's an additional cost to the company.
Sure.
Versus a contractor, but you're $500 a week, then I'm just hand you $500 in cash a week, and it's on them to pay that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why people avoid that.
Sure. I mean, it makes sense, but still, it can get you into trouble.
Employees are more expensive.
Okay, so you're considering your benefits, you're considering your PTO policy, your and sick days and all those things. Bereavement's probably added in there. You're considering your disciplinary policy, or what you're going to do if, how you're going to manage when someone messes up or makes a mistake, unintentionally or unintentionally, what you're going to do about that. Your what else? Discuss. You just need to think through what you're going to allow them to be privy to, all the way down to what rooms can they if it's a social media coordinator, does she need to be going to the supply room for any reason at all ever? Probably not. Get her a couple empty boxes of Juvederm and whatever, just keeping, even if it's like, oh, I trust her with my life, there's no reason if there's no reason for it, it's
just err on the side of caution.
Err on the side of caution.
And to that point, when you have that person come into your spot, whoever it is, the first time, it is you just not only just access to like things in the spa, but also like just in general, like if you are finances, like you have a person to talk to now. So like you want to rope that person into that type of stuff, or do you have an outlet with someone else? Like you just gotta be real careful. Is that the right person to
and that could be a
fully divulge
other,
in?
That's it back into the what I'm trying to keep away from too much. Not that it's bad to bring it up, but the managing people thing, like best you
are you gonna treat them like a partner or an employee?
A partner in making and how they in decision, employee, a bestie. It's like you need to be careful in how those go, and our culture is such that like friends or just we're open and all and stuff, and we're pretty loose with each other, but
let's not blur the lines of who's the boss and who's
blurring
the employee.
Blurring the lines, being careful about that, and no means perfect, but that's another point one. And then what else? That's I feel like those are some just major bullet points to consider, and then a little research, as I mentioned in the beginning, to understand some of the intricacies of.
Let's touch on the interview real quick, because I'm very passionate about this. Just real quick, when you're going to bring somebody on, a lot of people bring on somebody they already know right away, which is good. That's great. It's much better if I know a friend of mine who's been injecting down the street and wants to come over, and she's already a friend. I know her. I've spent time with her. I always talk about sharing a meal. Like there's a lot of things you learn about somebody beyond sitting in front of you for an hour interviewing. Mm-hmm. We as nurses and such make such it's like shopping for insurance, and on all our podcasts to say it all the time. Take the time to shop. Don't take the first thing that comes to you, because we're not very good at doing that as medical providers, because we're given all of those things in traditional medicine. But interviewing is the same way. If you don't have that person pegged because you already know them, you've worked with them in the past, or whatever the case is, even if you have, interviewing multiple people or interviewing the same person multiple times, behavioral-based interviews, another, Quentin Suter is very much into behavioral-based interviewing, which is they come and shadow you. You get to watch them do X, Y, and Z. You can do test things when someone shadows, like, purposely have trash that's sitting around the trash can in the office and bring them in, and then literally it's testing them. See if they pick that trash up next to the trash can when they go to throw something away. It's little things like that, behaviorally testing people to see if they fit your type of culture, if that's something you care about, and taking a little bit more time. You can't tell shit about somebody in a 30-minute interview. They're going to say, I can be, y'all give me 5 people to be in an interview and then try me in 30 minutes, and I will nail all 5 of those personalities. Most people can be whoever you need them to be for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then you quickly find out when they come in, they're not at all what you said. So go beyond the traditional, they came in for an hour and I talked to them and they were great. Cool. Anybody can do that. And go beyond that. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can Google that, how to do some behavioral interview stuff, asking behavioral questions, having somebody else take a peek, whatever the case is. I'm all about 30-day trial periods. So this is a 30-day, 90-day, you're out. Come in, 2 weeks in, you just turn to shit. you're done. Like, give yourself an immediate, no disciplinary, I get to decide 30 days, no question asked. It's in your employment contract. You're out for any reason I want, and you're not going to get anything for this because you just came in and were not who you said you were in the interview. Have that protection in your employment contract.
Yeah.
Things like that, because it is fascinating how many times someone comes in, they said they could do 100 things. They said they were proficient at all these things. You can't test all that. Paper resumes, I can write, check references. I can put, I'll be honest, not to be negative, I can put, Sally Smith was my CNO for 10 years at, this hospital. Mary, will you be Sally? Great. Yeah, 615-31, and Mary answers like, Sally Smith. It's insane. And people,
Sally Smith here.
Yeah, I've seen it all.
At your service.
I've seen it all. Like, the time I sent flowers to an employee who took bereavement because it said her dad died, and the funeral home was like, we don't have anybody by that name. And I was like, what?
I don't think I've heard that story.
Oh, yeah. I feel like it's amazing how I just could never imagine some of the things that you can see managing people. And so it's just keeping...
How did that go?
Not very well. Not very well. I'll tell you more about it. But keeping your guard up at all times and your trust level low, even if they're a good friend of yours, because people will do and protect their own. And I don't want to be, the bigger you get, the easier it gets for people to get a little more flippant about stuff because they assume someone else will cover them or whatever the case is. And so it's not to be negative, because we have an open, transparent culture and a good high level of trust and a good, easy, you need to do that. Absolutely. But there should be a big brother's always watching. And that I've learned that is number one over the years. Like, I can track and trace almost every single thing, and you should set those foundational stones to be able to do those things just to protect yourself.
Set that foundational fear.
I do. I can see everything.
I think it's a healthy fear.
It is. Just helps keep and the bad ones, the real bad ones, rise always up. You catch those ones pretty early, but it's the 30%
stealthy little sneaky ones.
Yeah, they get through the first 30, 60, 90 days, and then all of a sudden just it's just something all the time. So just trying to look out for that.
Yeah.
A yellow flag is a yellow flag is a yellow flag. If your gut tells you a little flag is waving, mark the flag, write it down, take note of it, and don't ignore it. You're just going to hurt yourself in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
go hire that employee.
Yeah. All right. So it's better just to be a one-man band and just leave it at that.
It's just that Mary was like, I want it to be a little lighter, and I'm like, I
didn't say lighter.
No, I meant higher. You meant like a little more lightheaded and lighthearted. A little. I really, and it's probably too much. Mary knows this about me. I just think there's so much to even managing one person and so much to this realm. And I take it so probably too seriously. Like it's really, really passionate about it. And so it's important to dig into the abstract. It's just not black and white. When you start managing a human, you don't even know what a dog is going to do day to day. How in the hell can you have black and white for a human? Like, you just can't imagine people come up with.
Our poor Ruby girl or Rottweilers at the event.
So anyways, thanks for tuning in. As always, Patreon. Maybe I'll do a Patreon on unlimited PTO and some HR topics. That'd be good.
That would be good.
www.patreon.com/smiley-aesthetics. Our Patreon.
I'm talking way too fast. So our Patreon that has, we have everything from a ton of clinical stuff. We've got some legal stuff from our chief legal officers, legal guidance stuff, of course, never legal advice, never giving medical advice or financial advice or anything like that. Carla does a bunch of stuff on business stuff and brings in the financial just guidance and stuff. We have our director of IT doing stuff.
Director of quality
put up there on how to build your own website was a recent one. Our director of quality's put. We really have built out that Patreon to be a lot of different facets, all dedicated to medical aesthetics, and then some other stuff for entrepreneurial things that can be applied elsewhere, but very medical aesthetic specific. And it's patreon.com/smiley-aesthetics. So we post all these on here as well, all the podcasts on there as well, and then we take custom requests. So if you want something on there and you're a member of the podcast, of the Patreon, we'll make that for you, and we'll do that for you, including injecting all the way to, some topics and stuff. So You can find this everywhere. I don't know why we say this. I feel like wherever you're listening this to, that's where you found it. But it's on Apple. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and then you can watch us on YouTube sometimes. That we may not continue that too much. We do plan on having guests. We're about to move into some guest speaker stuff. So we've met so
Mainly because
many.
me and Mary are tired of
Yeah, a
doing
lot
it.
because it's probably getting old watching us. So next week we are on PTO that we planned a long time ago, and we have a couple of our employees that hopefully are going to be doing a podcast. Sorry for missing the last couple weeks, and then we plan on really interviewing some guests and stuff, maybe just be over Zoom. But we've met so many incredible people in this industry that have so much knowledge to share, and we have some big things coming up with Smiley and partnerships and stuff. So we're definitely going to start tapping into some of the people that we've met and talked to them. So, so that's all. Yeah. So share this if you thought it was funny or you found it interesting, please, or just like it or leave
Reach
a
out with
comment.
any questions about hiring somebody, any thoughts and that stuff. We love to help with some of those things. I think
Yeah, you can if
the
you
business
wanna,
stuff is great. I think as you grow though, I'm really passionate about doing that type of stuff.
leave a comment here, or she's at C Smiley Injector on Instagram, and I'm at Injector Smiley. Those are I answer my own DMs. We are who we are on the DM thing. So if you want a message or something, that's the easiest way to get a hold of us, I think, to have a conversation quickly. So, all right. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.